So a very warm welcome to today's Foundation Years online event with a strong focus on food safety and sensory food education. My name is James Hempsall and I'm your chair for today's event. And my job now is to remind you of the session aims and to work through the agenda so that you're clear about what's going to happen. As the holding slide said, you will receive the slides after today, so there's no need to be furiously scribbling away at the content. So you will be able to receive the slides, of which they do include video as well, so you'll be able to watch the video also. And this session is being recorded. It's being recorded so that you can revisit its content. It's also being recorded so that those people unable to join us at a daytime event can watch at their leisure, and we'll be hosting the recording on the Foundation Years website and sharing it through our social media platforms. So on the next slide, just wanted to remind you around why we have Foundation Years. Foundation Years is funded by the Department for Education, and this year it's being delivered by Coram Family and Childcare and Hempsall's in partnership as the department's engagement partner. And that means that Foundation Years is here to support everyone in the sector in understanding and meeting EYFS reforms, but also to share information and evidence on child development and effective practice in early education. It's our role through Foundation Years to support everyone in the sector in understanding vital EYFS safety requirements, such as the safety of children when they're sleeping and eating as well. And clearly today's event has a strong focus on food and eating. But we're also here to support wider consultation and engagement through the Foundation Years website and through our social media, including our Facebook and Twitter, vodcasts, and online and live CPD events, and today's event is clearly one of those. So on the next slide, we are here to engage, to connect and support best practice. We'll have a mix of live and online events. We opened up 1,000 places for people to join us today, and as I said, it's a recorded session and slides will be sent to you and shared. But our aims today are to share specifically our plans for Foundation Years throughout the rest of the year, but also so that you can receive an update directly from the Department for Education on choking prevention, but also to focus on one key EYFS practice topic, and that today is sensory food education. And we're not just presenting today, there is a session at the end for discussion and Q&A, and I'll say a little bit more about how you can get involved in that a bit later. But let's just have a look at the agenda then. So after this welcome introduction, in a moment, I'm going to be handing over to my colleague Megan Jarvie from Coram Family and Childcare, who will explain and outline in a little bit more detail what we're aiming to do through Foundation Years. Then we'll be handing over to DFE for a spotlight on that from Laura Linden, who will be looking at choking prevention. Our main speaker for today's event is from Taste Ed, and we have Ruth Platt and Jason O'Rourke talking about sensory food education. I have to say we had a fantastic live event in London on the 24th of April, and Taste Ed did a presentation and a workshop at it. So we were super keen to be able to extend their amazing content today online for those of you that prefer to attend online. So how do you get involved then? This is a Teams webinar, which don't worry, we can't actually see or hear delegates. It's just the best option if we're opening up 1,000 places, and it's the best user experience for us. We can't see or hear you on screen, but you should be able to see speakers through your device if that allows. And sometimes settings are different on different devices. So if you can't see me at the moment, you might want to check your settings or rejoin if you need to. That sometimes does it. But we really do want to encourage you to share your thoughts and comments and questions, requests and ideas. So do click on the Q&A and chat functions, depending on which one you can use. Do comment, do make comments, and do ask questions, because we'll be putting those to speakers towards the end of today's session. Or you can email us on fy@hempsals.com if you want to make any comments without the chat or QA function. So do email us if that works for you best. Okay, I think that's all we need to do to talk about to make this event as successful as possible. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Megan Jarvie from Coram Family and Childcare. Good morning, Megan.
Morning, James. How are you?
Hi, well.
So I'm Megan. I'm head of Coram Family and Childcare, and I'm really, really pleased to be working with you as part of Foundation Years and to see so many of you here today. As James said, I'm going to talk through a bit more about what we're doing for Foundation Years and our plan for the year ahead. Coram Family and Childcare and Hempsals have come together as Department for Education's engagement partner, and we really aim to bring you the strengths of our two organisations. We share a passion for the early years and working collaboratively with the sector to change young lives. And it's been really great to be able to bring together those ideas along with the Department for Education to push the and develop what we can offer you. It's a partnership that really does feel stronger than the sum of its parts. So let me go on to what these plans actually look like for the year ahead on the next slide there. So our approach is strengths-based. It's about recognising the immense knowledge and experience that exists within the EYFS community, and we aim to provide a platform for this expertise. It's based on 3 elements: engage, connecting, and sharing best practice. So what do they actually mean in practice? So we're here to engage. This is about a dialogue, a 2-way dialogue where we'll discuss key topics, listen to different insights, and respond meaningfully. It can be a place to share, learn with others, and celebrate ideas. We're here to connect. So that's about connecting you to the information that you want and need in the way that works for you. And we're here to connect you with each other as well and the people and experiences that are most helpful for you. And we're here to share best practice. So Foundation Years is a community of expertise and learning, and we want to facilitate the opportunities for you to hear about and celebrate the fantastic work that's taking place right across this sector. So how exactly is it that we're going to do that? We're going to provide you with news and updates on policy and practice. We know that things can move very quickly sometimes, and it can be quite hard to stay on top of the latest examples, latest evidence, what's happening. And so we're trying to make that a bit easier. We're also going to provide online and face-to-face events so that you get a chance to hear about these in a bit more detail and to learn from each other as well. These events are for engagement, so that's to hear and to be heard as well. We're going to make information easy to access so that you don't get lost in that sea of information. We're going to use the newsletter, the website, so that you've got the information that you need to make tangible improvements to practice. And we aim to support the community for the whole sector. So that's anyone working with the EYFS from the first day of studies throughout your career as well. And celebrating the breadth of the sector is a real driver of Foundation Years. We aim for Foundation Years to reflect and serve this diversity. So whatever setting you work in, whether you work from your own home, whether you work directly with young children or supporting those that do, it's a broad community and it's united by this passion to bring the best for children. We know that needs and preferences are going to vary a lot within this sector that is so varied, and so we're going to try and do our best to meet all those different needs that you have. And this is the kind of people that we're thinking about that the community includes, so you can see just quite how broad that is. So I want to go into a bit more detail now about what our plans are over the coming months, because we've got quite a lot planned there. We don't expect everyone to engage with every aspect of things that we're doing, but the reason we've got so many different things going on is so that you can find what works for you, what works for your colleagues, and get the information that you need in the way that works for you. So the first thing we're doing is events. Obviously, this is one of them. This is our second online event, and we've held one face-to-face event in London that James already mentioned. Next month, we've got another one in Birmingham, and that's going to be followed in the autumn by an event in Manchester and another one in London as well. And then we're going to have this our second online event, and we've got another 2 of those coming up as well. And we're going to be running those at different times of day and different days of the week to try and match different needs and preferences. So, for example, our first online event was an evening one so that people could attend after perhaps a day at work, or if you work different hours as well. And we're also looking to do things at the weekend as well. But even if you're not able to attend, we aim to make the content available for the whole Foundation Years community through blogs, podcasts, and recording of the events. Vodcasts and blogs are one way that we aim to spark new ideas about things that you could do differently with young children. Some of these will be providing updates on latest evidence and policy and practice development. But one of our key aims for these is to amplify the voice of the sector, what's happening in settings with children. And we particularly want to use the vodcasts to document and celebrate the things that are fantastic things that are happening in different areas. And so if you've got something that you think really marks you out as different, that you know is really working, that you'd like to share with the rest of the foundation community, please do get in touch, because that's exactly the kind of thing that we know that other people want to hear about as well. And we can look at doing a blog or a vodcast together. We've also got our Foundation Years website, and that acts as the hub for storing all the information that you need. And we want this to be the go-to place for accessing all the documents and information you want. We've got plans to make some improvement to that website, because we know it's not quite as great as we would like it to be at the moment. And so do keep giving us feedback about that as well. As James mentioned, we have 2 social media accounts, our Twitter and our Facebook, and these are great ways to stay up to date with what's going on and also to engage with colleagues. So please do follow those, get involved, leave comments, chat with us. It's a good way to get involved. And then the thing that you probably know Foundation Years through most because it lands right there in your inbox is our newsletter and our news flashes. They got a monthly newsletter, and then more regular than that, news flashes as well, with key bits of information. And we want to make these engaging way that you can stay up to date with what's going on. And one of the new things that we're going to start offering are newsletter lives, which are short online events where we get to go into a bit more depth about some of the things that are included in the newsletter. So you see there's a lot coming up and a lot of different ways of getting involved. The final slide here has the information there about exactly how you can get involved, where the website is, how to sign up for that newsletter. I assume you're getting it already. If you're not, that's a key thing to do, and the Facebook and Twitter. So, like I say, lots of different ways of getting in touch. Find the ones that work best for you. But it's also having a think about what works for you might be slightly different for your colleagues. Because the last request I'd like to make is to pass on, spread the word about Foundation Years. It's a community, and the more people that are involved, the more you can have, more people you have to share ideas with, to learn from, the stronger the community gets. So recommend a friend and let them know about the whole offer as well, because what works for you might be different for them. So thanks very much. Back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Megan. Brilliant. And I can only repeat Megan's message to pass it on, share with colleagues, and grow and strengthen the community across Foundation Years. Thank you very much. Let's move on then. We're going to have a look at a Department for Education spotlight on choking prevention. I'm delighted now to introduce Laura Linden, who's going to take us through those. Good morning, Laura.
Thank you, James. Good morning. Hello, everyone. As James said, I'm Laura Linden. I'm the Early Years Foundation Stage Health and Wellbeing Policy Lead, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here to speak to you all today. My remit covers things such as nutrition, mental health, paediatric first aid, and food safety, which is why I'm here to speak to you about choking prevention. According to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, every month in the UK, a child dies from choking. Hundreds more require hospital treatment, and sadly, many of these hospitalisations result in life-changing consequences. Tragically, some of these cases have happened within early years settings. And although these accidents can happen to anyone at any time, there are steps that can be taken to try and minimise the occurrence of these incidents. As early years practitioners, I would hazard a guess that there are very few of you who at some point have not had to respond to a child choking. Luckily, often a few backslaps will ensure that the item is dislodged. I know as a parent that I've had a few of these incidents with both of my children. Luckily, all was well, but for those few seconds whilst the child is choking and you are doing what you need to do to help, it can feel like a lifetime. The EYFS has a minimum paediatric first aid requirement, which means that there should be at least one qualified paediatric first aider on site who is able to respond to emergencies quickly. The criteria set for paediatric first aid courses in the EYFS stipulates that this should include training on how to help a baby and child who is choking. However, as is the way with most things in life, prevention is better than the cure. And choking prevention is very much an important policy area that we are continually working on to ensure that we are doing all we can to minimise these incidents within early years settings. Children can choke on all manner of small objects. Ensuring children are only accessing age-appropriate toys and objects, and ensuring that they are not putting small items in their mouths is of course something you will all be doing every day to keep children safe in your setting. However, meal times and snack times are very high-risk environments for choking incidents due to the obvious fact that we are actively encouraging children to put things in their mouths. In addition, these are often very busy times of the day for early years settings. The settings that I have been privileged to visit over lunchtimes have felt like wonderfully controlled chaos, with food being prepared and served, hands being washed, and with fabulous conversations and interactions happening between practitioners and children. There's always seems to be a lot going on. Can we move the slide on, please? This brings me to the adequate supervision whilst eating change that was announced as part of the spring budget. Currently, there is a requirement within the EYFS that states that providers must ensure that children are adequately supervised, including whilst eating, and decide how to deploy staff to ensure children's needs are met. It also says children must usually be within sight and hearing of staff and always within sight or hearing. Our engagement with the sector and stakeholders has shown us that most practitioners consider adequate supervision whilst eating to mean that children should be within sight and hearing of a member of staff, not just within sight or hearing. However, there have been some occasions where this has not been the case. We had some worrying feedback from a few LAs that a small number of providers were not interpreting the requirement this way, and children were often only within sight or hearing of staff. Given the fact that a choking child can be completely silent, this of course is not good enough. This is why we consulted on changing the requirement in the EYFS to add an additional sentence to the requirement to make it explicit that whilst eating, children must be within sight and hearing of a member of staff. There was overwhelming support of this change, and we plan for this to be updated in the next iteration of the EYFS. We have also tried to support practitioners by sharing information on choking prevention and the safe preparation of food for children. We work closely with paediatricians, the Department of Health and Social Care, and NHS England to produce the food safety page on the Help for Early Years Providers platform. Here you can find practical tips on what food shouldn't be served to children according to their age and development, and also how to safely prepare food for children to help minimise these incidents. You can find the link to this resource on this slide pack, which I believe will be circulated afterwards. We also sign out to helpful resources such as the Start for Life Safe Weaning advice. I know that you are the experts when it comes to caring for our youngest children, but there's always more that all of us can learn. For example, before I took on this role, I was pretty certain that I had a sound idea of how to prepare food for young children. At the time, I had a 16-year-old, but also a 4-year-old. I knew to cut grapes in half lengthways and small round fruits into quarters. What I didn't know, however, was a safe way to prepare sausages by removing the skins and cutting them into strips rather than discs. Of course, this changed straight away as soon as I knew, much to the surprise of my youngest child. But I guess that's the point. You don't know what you don't know. Hopefully, the food safety content on the Help for Early Years Providers platform will be a valuable resource to remind practitioners of how to prepare food safely for children, and maybe in some cases, practitioners will learn something new. We have also worked closely with the Food Standards Agency, who produced a choking hazards table and poster specifically for early years. These are hosted on the Foundation Years website, and we would encourage all providers to print and display these wherever food is being prepared for children, as a reminder of how to best prepare food to minimise choking incidents. As previously mentioned, there has been a lot of engagement with the sector and stakeholders to inform this work, which is indeed ongoing. An issue that repeatedly comes up is that of training. Training new practitioners on choking prevention and how to prepare foods safely for children was seen as something that could be improved upon. According to feedback, we were told that it was often the task of more junior, newly qualified members of staff to prepare the snacks for children. This is why the new Early Educator Level 3 criteria, which comes into force in September 2024, now includes specific requirements around weaning as well as choking prevention. As I have already mentioned, our work here in this area is ongoing. We know we need to continue to listen and learn from the whole sector and most importantly from you as practitioners. Undoubtedly, when tragic incidents occur in settings, we do all we can to understand, learn and improve. But it's important that we continue to proactively ensure we are doing all we can to keep our youngest children safe. So we will continue to listen and engage with you all and ensure that best practice is shared as widely as possible. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to talk to you all about today. Thank you so much for listening and for your continued engagement on these important issues. Look forward to your questions later.
Thank you, Laura. Brilliant update and very timely policy reminder there. So very much appreciate that. So let's move on. And the next agenda item, we can move the slide on and introduce Taste Ed. We have input here around sensory food education. So continuing the theme, I'm delighted to introduce Jason O'Rourke and Ruth Platt, who are our main speakers for today. And as I said at the beginning of today's event, we had a fantastic live event in London on the 24th of April, of which Jason was one of the speakers, and we had a Taste Ed workshop. It was by far the most popular aspect of the day, and we were very, very keen to extend the reach of this content to as many people as possible, especially during today's online session. So good morning, Jason and Ruth.
Morning. Thank you, James, and thank you for the opportunity to share sensory food education and the Taste Ed curriculum, and it leads really well on from Laura's fantastic presentation about choking hazards and exposing children to food but safely. And myself, I'm going to start off this presentation, then lead on and introduce Ruth a little bit later on to go into the details of Taste Ed. As Joe said, I'm a head teacher of a nursery and primary school in Lincolnshire, and we've been using sensory food education, the Taste Ed curriculum, for the past probably 6 years to really, really good effect. And as James mentioned, I was there on the 24th of January, 24th of this month to do the live presentation, but then I had to shoot off because we got the Ofsted call that morning. And I'm pleased to know that Ofsted did see our Taste Ed sessions in our early years settings and were really, really impressed with them. You know, they see this as a really effective way to support children's health and well-being. And it was great that they can recognise that this is a really important area of children's development. So it's great to get that kind of tick in the box of them seeing this and seeing it as a great practice. Okay, so I'm going to if we can have the next slide, please. Just run through what myself and Ruth are going to be looking at this morning. I'm going to talk, lay out the foundation of ultra-processed food, why this is a really important area that children should be exposed to within the early years settings. And then Ruth is going to carry on with what Taste Ed is, a brief history of Taste Ed, how we got to where we are now, why it works, the benefits of it, and then next steps as well. Next slide, please. So, ultra-processed food, you may have heard of the term. It's about food that has gone through a process, probably in factories. It's not fresh food. And unfortunately, it's really prevalent in today's society. We've got over 60% of children in the UK, their diets are made up primarily of ultra-processed food. And I've got a few quotes here from some big players in the food academic world, as in Professor Tim Spector and also Henry Dimbleby. the quote there from Professor Tim Spector about the highest rates of ultra-processed food consumption in children here in the UK and the highest rates of obesity in Europe. These two factors are linked, okay? And we need to start prioritising children's diet over the short-term interests of giant food companies, because if we don't act now, it will be impossible. Tim Spector is one of the most cited food scientists in the world and the co-founder of the Zoe programme, which looks at how certain foods affect our bodies. His conclusion there is that we are children are being continued to be exposed to processed foods, and you'll see it, I'm sure, in your daily, when you go to supermarkets, you go to shops, there's an awful lot of food, unhealthy food that's still being exposed to children, and this is having a really negative effect on not just their physical health, but also their mental well-being as well. Henry Dimbleby, his fantastic book that was released about 6 weeks ago, Ravenous, kind of unpicks where we are as a society to do with food. He is the author of the School Food Plan about 10 years ago, and he's also author of the National Food Strategy that appeared a couple of years ago. And you can see from there, we eat an awful lot of this ultra processed food. That's adult rates there, 57% of our diet, but children's rates are over 60%. And it makes us hungrier and less satisfied than we would be. And we also put on more weight because of it. And it links also to certain non-communicable diseases, notably type 2 diabetes, but also cancers, depressive symptoms, and the risk of cardiovascular disease and heart disease. So what we're putting in our bodies is having a really, really negative effect if we concentrate on the ultra-processed food. And our aim, really, within schools is to make children and expose them to as many healthy foods as possible. Next slide, please. Now, the long-term impact of this, if we're exposing our children to this, is that they are going to, the diet-related diseases are the biggest cause of avoidable illness and death in the developed world. Okay, obesity and people being overweight, by 2016, the expected figures are 80% of the population in the UK is going to be obese, not just overweight. When I first started looking at children's health and well-being in schools about 15 years ago, we had the kind of rhetoric of it was children that were overweight, and then it crept in about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, overweight and obese. Now we're just talking about obese with a BMI of over 30, and the cost of this man-made disaster is really hard to overstate. Already, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development estimates that the UK economy will lose £74 billion a year in lost workforce productivity, shortened lives, and NHS costs because of conditions related to high BMI. So it's not just a health issue here, we're talking about an economic issue. And a few weeks ago, we had this UK barking up the wrong tree, trying to get over 50s back to work. It wasn't because when they analysed it, it wasn't because the over 50s didn't want to get back to work. It was because of health issues. It was because of NHS waiting lists. So what we are putting in our bodies is having such a knock-on effect all the way through society. And no other avoidable cause of illness, not even smoking, steals so many lives, years of life from us. And before it kills us, it makes us miserable. So the side effects of obesity include depression, anxiety, infertility, high blood pressure, and broken sleep. And that's even before we get to the big ones, your cancer and your dementia and your heart failure, which has its own attending risks to blindness, peripheral neuropathy, and limb amputation. Okay, I'm going to get brighter with this this presentation. Not going to be all too doom and gloom. Next slide, please. The issue of food and our food system is a really complex one, and it's not just with education or health either. There's so many parameters and so many departments within government that deal with this. You can see there that we've got 9 departments, okay, that have a specific input into our food system and trying to make it better. We've got your education there, you've got your public health, but it also links up with local government housing. It also, of course, links up with the environment and food and rural affairs. So it's a multi-governmental agency issue that if we can tackle it at each and every level and really make this an area that we can move on and make better, okay, it doesn't just lie at education stall, but it's really important, I think, that we know about this and we know that we can make a real difference to this, a real positive difference to this. Okay, next slide, please. This slide here is about how a country, Finland, who we know have got a fantastic curriculum, one that's often cited as one that we should be aspiring to, how they've included sensory food-based education within their own national curriculum. Okay, they've introduced a SAPEER method, which Ruth will talk to, which TasteStead is based upon, within their own national curriculum. This was a 10-year process, which began with central government departments working together, and then they started implementing trials in individual municipalities and councils. Now it's now the core component of their own international lauded curriculum. The earliest projects in Finland were carried out in 2002 and 2006. And it was based on the Finnish model, which was taken from the French model. So it's a European link here. And it had really good feedback from pupils, teachers and parents, and encouraged them to continue. The actual governmental national programme was launched in 2008. So they did their kind of pilot programme for 4 to 6 years. And this then expanded out into every kindergarten and school in Finland. And I've been over to Finland and seen it in practice, and it is really, really impressive. What they're doing there for children's health, which then leads on to the benefits for adults as well. First operators were the Central Finland Healthcare District, and now the operators are mainly non-governmental organisations. And funding comes at the moment only from one source, their Ministry for Agriculture and Forestry, but also they got lots of other money previous to that from lots of other sources. So they started to evolve it and change it, and it's a really, really important part of their curriculum. It's one of the 4 pillars of Finnish education. Okay, is the food that they offer to children in schools. Next slide, please. Looking here at the National Food Strategy we alluded to earlier that Henry Dimbleby put together, the recommendations for there, and hence why we're working here with the DFE, because they've taken the recommendations for the plan and thinking, how can we encourage other schools to do this, other settings to do this? Because we've got no legal obligation to teach cookery and nutrition, okay? But sensory education, which TasteStead is for the early years, was recommended in the National Food Strategy as a really effective way to engage children in the pleasures and joy of healthy food. And we mustn't forget those 2 words there. A lot of what's gone on previously with food education is based on diet and nutrition and carbs and proteins and eat well plates and all that type of thing. And it hasn't really worked because we've now got over 30% of Year 6 children overweight or obese. Okay, and that gets steadily worse when you do the National Child Measurement Programme from when they were in reception up until Year 6. And I often say if they were my SATS results, then I'd be out of a job because they start about 20% overweight or obese, and now it's up to 30 in Year 6. So in that intervening years in primary, that's what happens. Next slide, please. EYFS settings and schools are the single biggest opportunity to get children's health right. We've got them for 190 days of the year, haven't we? If we can change, and I've seen it happen in my school and also other schools that take on sensory food education, it changes children's perceptions, it then changes adults' perceptions and the parents, and it also changes the community as well, and they're thinking about their own children's health and well-being. And that's a really important core thing. As parents yourself, the most important thing is your child's health. And if we can make that difference within a school, we're doing a really, really good job. Next slide, please. So what does the DFE state about food in the EYFS settings? Children are provided with meals and snacks and drinks, which need to be healthy, balanced and nutritious, and also with fresh drinking water available to children at all times. We all know this. And the Development Matters guidance are encouraged to narrate their own decisions about healthy foods, highlighting the importance of eating plenty of fruit and vegetables, which is the core element of sensory food education and TasteStead. Talk to children about healthy eating, and also use picture books and other resources so that they get that support there. Next slide, please. Before I lead on to Ruth, I just want to tell you a little what happened in our school, okay, and why your jobs in your early years settings is so pivotal to changing children's palates. Okay, so as I said, I'm ahead of a nursery and a primary school. We had a visitor a couple of years ago, came into the school to look at our food education. It was around about this time of year, because it was the back end. It was a week after SATs, I remember, because we have a pizza oven. Children in year 6 had made the dough the day before, and that day they were putting the toppings on their dough. They were putting the tomato base on it and a few different toppings. And we had a child who'd only joined the school a couple of months beforehand, and we had some mozzarella, and she was putting a tiny bit of mozzarella on her pizza, on one side of the pizza. And I said to her, you know, how come you're only putting a little bit of mozzarella on there? And she was saying, I don't really know. I don't think I'll like it. I don't really want to try it. I'll try it a little bit, but I don't really want to, you know, put a lot of it on. And, you know, understandable. But if you've tried mozzarella yourselves, you know it has a really bland flavour. It doesn't taste of much. Okay, so we then came out of the classroom. We walked maybe about 40 metres down to our FS setting and our nursery. And we walked out into the back, and we have a mud kitchen out there, and there's a child in there who had only arrived a few weeks previous, just after their 3rd birthday, arrived in the Easter holidays. Becky, our nursery teacher, was there, and this child had mud all over their face, completely, you know, just covered in mud. And I was saying to Becky, well, why have they got mud on their face? And Becky was saying, well, she's eating mud. She's eating it, putting it in his mouth. And you're thinking, we've all done that. Everybody probably watching this webinar has done that. You've probably only done it once. But the thing is, we've got a child at the age of 3 who will put anything in their mouth because that's how they're exploring things. And then we have a child 40 metres up at age 11 who is really hesitant about putting something really as bland as mozzarella into their mouth. And in those intervening years, okay, from the ages of 5 to 11, those primary years, those early years, Key Stage 1, EYFS, there's where we can make a big difference, and we can expose children to the pleasures and joy of food. Because I guarantee once children try these things, because they might not get those opportunities at home, okay, for all types of reasons. But if we can give them those opportunities into school, it is an absolute joy. You see all real learning happening in front of you. And that is job satisfaction, isn't it, for every teacher there? Okay, next slide, please. I'd like to introduce you to, I'm going to go quiet now as I set the scene. I said it's now going to lighten up. Sorry, last slide here. You can see this is our year in food education at the school, Washington Academy. But TasteStead there, in that kind of beige area there, is our foundation. We cannot do all the things that go around the edge unless we've got children's engagement with the food happening. And that is what we do in our early years. When the children come in at 3, they have weekly sessions with the lessons that Ruth will go through with you. Once you've got that, we've got them. We captured them. They absolutely love it. And then we can start building it up into food, which has such a massive impact on our own lives, our own physical well-being. But it's one of those things that we engage in, hopefully, every day. So let's make it a really positive experience. Okay. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce you to Ruth Platt, who's primary and early years teacher for 25 years. She's now the senior lecturer and practitioner in the School of Education at Anglia Ruskin University, and she is our TasteStead education consultant. Over to you, Ruth.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everybody. It's really great to see you all, and I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about TasteStead and what it is and how it can be delivered, why it's so exciting, and why we just love it in the TasteStead team. Next slide, please. So back in the 18th century, Immanuel Kant, who was a philosopher, made the statement that all our knowledge begins with our senses. And if we think about the most profound and exciting learning experiences that we've had in our lives, most times it's to do with our senses. It's to do with our senses being stimulated, and that's what kind of really helps us to experience deep learning and develop our knowledge. And when we watch young children learning, as many of you do on a daily basis, you'll notice how they don't just look at things. They want to pick them up, they want to touch them, they want to smell them, they often want to put them in their mouths, they want to listen to them. They're very exploratory in the way they explore and play. And TasteEd has identified that teaching children about food using their senses is very effective. So what is TasteEd? Short for Taste Education, TasteEd is an exciting and unique scheme of work. This is sensory food education for children, which enables them to develop a new relationship with food. Using their 5 senses, we encourage children to explore fresh fruit and vegetables. It's an evidence-based, practical approach to sensory food education. The sessions are simple, they are hands-on activities for children which allow them to explore fresh produce using all their senses. TasteEd helps children learn to enjoy eating fruits and vegetables, and it actually transforms their relationship with food. There are over 100 resources for teachers and practitioners to use from EYFS up to Year 6. And the lessons and session activities have been designed to be taught by all staff, all practitioners, and all people working in our community. So childminders, for example, and other workers who are in our community working with children and families are finding that the TasteEd activities and session plans are really helpful for engaging families and children around food and developing that really positive relationship with food. TasteEd has been successfully taught and embedded in large and diverse primary settings and early year settings, in cities, but also in smaller rural settings. So all over the UK, we've got people trialling and embedding TasteEd into their curriculum. So Jason kind of touched on the history of TasteEd, and it's been adapted from a curriculum called Sapere, which was created in Sweden in the 1990s. But it actually all began in 1974 with a man called Jacques Pousset, who was a French winemaker. And even back then, he was concerned about young children showing a preference for sugary, sweet, fatty food. And he really wanted to readdress that. And he developed Les Glaces de Goût, which were taste lessons for primary French primary school children. And he wanted to educate them in kind of the pleasures of healthy food. Our founder, Bea Wilson, who founded TasteEd with Jason, who was just talking, came across the Sapere curriculum when she was researching her book, First Bite. And then together, Bea and Jason found a way to embed the TasteEd curriculum into the national curriculum, to align it with the national curriculum and the early years curriculum. And I had the pleasure in 2018 of trialing some of those very early sessions with my reception children. And that's when I kind of got really excited about the possibilities of what TasteEd could offer. And today we're engaged with over 800 schools and nurseries across the UK, and we're getting lots and lots of very positive feedback about the impact that these sessions are having on children and on their relationship with food. So why does TasteEd work? So we've had lots of discussions about this within the team. Now, what is it? How do we articulate it? It's sort of amazing when you're delivering a TasteEd session, because the engagement that the children have with the activities and the lessons is always just incredibly high. Children get excited when we talk about TasteEd. When they know their TasteEd is kind of part of their day, that's what they're looking forward to. And at the heart of the TasteEd curriculum and method are the golden rules. So no one has to try and no one has to like. And these remove the pressure from children feeling like they have to put the food in their mouths. And instead, we teach children that they can explore food using all of their senses. So just as they would do naturally, they can touch the food, they can smell the food, they can listen to it. And if they want to, they can taste it. But if they're not quite ready to put it in their mouth and taste it, they can lick it. So they have all of the agency. They get to choose how to explore it. And through modelling that approach to exploring food, the children become more and more confident. They know they've got the agency, they've got the autonomy, and there's not pressure from the adults around them to eat food that they may be very unfamiliar with and very unsure about. So the TasteSed method is all about learning by doing, and it's a very experiential way of learning about food. And it works because the lessons are exciting and fun, yet really, really simple. It's been likened to some artifact-led teaching, which is popular amongst museum educators, where they too kind of harness the sensory responses to children when looking at objects. It generates curiosity and dialogue, and this is at the heart of the TasteSed pedagogy. And quite often with TasteSed, there are no real correct answers. We're asking the children what they can see, what they notice, what's the same, what's different, what do they think it might taste like. And so there are open questions with no correct answers. And this encouragement of talking about the food really helps the children to feel confident and excited to talk and explore the food with the practitioners. So children learn about the food through fun facts, and they can also learn to explore it. And the research shows that sensory food education improves children's willingness to try new foods. And this is certainly what we're seeing in settings, that once they've kind of talked about it and explored it, they're much, much more interested and more willing to actually put it in their mouths. And EYFS settings are really safe places to learn new skills. This is where children every day are taking risks with their learning. They're learning through playing, you know, with the amazing environments that people like you are creating. And in the presence of a trusted adult who is not putting that pressure on the children, children seem very willing to try new foods. They feel safe when they're surrounded by their peers, and their peers, they may be watching their peers trying something new, which may also be encouraging for them. And then this idea of no correct answers means they're very highly engaged in the sessions. They're not worried about getting the answers right or wrong. And we encourage the children to express their likes and dislikes, and we give them opportunities to really understand their food preferences and to explain why. It empowers them and gives them the vocabulary to talk about food in a way that many times children really just don't have. So what are the benefits of TasteSed for children? Primarily, TasteSed sessions are fun. This is making learning fun and engaging. So the TasteSed activities are full of games, and we really take this playful approach to learning. It helps children to learn to love eating fruit and vegetables, which are often the foods that younger children really shy away from and may have some anxiety about. TasteSed boosts children's self-confidence. You know, when a child actually tastes a new produce for the very first time, they feel very excited and very self-confident. And you can see that in them. When a child tastes a raw carrot for the very first time, it feels like an accomplishment for them. And it's really lovely to see it. It kind of promotes a can-do attitude. So I can explore the produce using my senses, but there's no pressure on them to actually put it in their mouths. Children get to explore and try a wider variety of produce, and they might be available at home, especially at the moment where family budgets are quite tight and the food options might be a bit more narrow. Actually bringing different produce into the setting is allowing children to have these new food experiences. And everyone loves to talk about food. That's true kind of across the whole world. And the children are the same. They love talking about food. You bring fresh produce into the setting, they want to talk about it, which makes the sessions very inclusive. Whatever the age, stage or ability of the child, they want to talk about food. And I've seen this again and again. Children who are reluctant to talk about anything else will talk about food, and they love to do so. Because of this kind of emphasis on open questions wherever possible, then there's no wrong answers, and so the children don't feel under pressure to get things right. And we really help them to understand their likes and dislikes and why. So why do they like raw carrot rather than cooked carrot? Maybe because they have a food preference around crunchy food, and they maybe don't like so much the texture of soft or cooked food. And so we help them to develop this wider vocabulary, and it has an amazing kind of impact on literacy skills and their speaking and listening skills as well. And we've noticed that when children have been doing TasteEd sessions, they eat lunch in a completely different way. And so we had one school where the year 2 children had been learning all about apples. When they went into the lunch hall, nobody chose the pudding. All the year 2s went for the apples because they'd changed their relationship with that piece of fruit. They'd explored it, they understood it, and they wanted to eat an apple. So over the pudding. So we see this time and time again in settings, and it's really exciting to see. Next slide, please. So the benefits of TasteEd for practitioners, all the resources are free. They're all on our website and accessible. The activities are simple, fun, easy to run and engaging, and you only need a few ingredients and minimal preparation and equipment. We do only focus on fresh fruit and vegetables. The SAPRA curriculum looked at other kind of tastes as well. So they were explored kind of more extreme tastes like soy sauce and crisps and things. But the thing about TasteEd is the focus is on fresh produce. And most sessions can be adapted to use the produce available. So you don't have to use the produce that we've suggested. If, for example, you're having trouble finding tomatoes, you can substitute that with something else. The activities are adapted for each year group within a school, and there's clear progression from EYFS to year 6. And nurseries are finding that the TasteEd and sessions are really applicable to the EYFS curriculum. So we've got lots of different earlier settings now really embedding TasteEd into everyday life. It's a really unique and hands-on way to teach healthy eating, this sensory approach to food education. And it provides a pedagogical approach to practitioners that really promotes high levels of well-being and engagement in the children. It's aligned with the EYFS curriculum, and it's really flexible. So it's really up to you how you want to deliver it. So in terms of the structure of TasteEd has resources and training videos for 18 EYFS activities, at least 5 lessons for each of the primary reception to year 6 sessions, and we've got sessions also dedicated to HAF providers as well. Each session covers or kind of concentrates on one of the 5 senses, although in reality we end up talking about all the senses in every session, but there is always a focus on one particular sense. Every activity includes an opportunity to recap the 5 senses, to remind the children which parts of our bodies we use for different senses. We remind practitioners to reiterate the golden rules because they really are at the heart of this approach. We talk about where food comes from, so there are food facts on the activity sheets, and a guidance on how to explore the food using each sense. There's an opportunity to try the food in every session, and we always try and remember to say, has anyone tried something new? And certainly in my experience of delivering TasteEd, at the beginning of the session, I'll have a large number of children who've never tried the particular produce I've taken in. And then by the end of the session, I have a high number of children who have tasted something for the very first time. So it's incredibly exciting as a practitioner to deliver and teach the TasteEd materials. So the TasteEd and the EYFS curriculum are really, really closely aligned. When I was talking to one of my colleagues who wanted to understand the EYFS curriculum a little more deeply, I said, go and take Development Matters and highlight how TasteEd might fit into each section of Development Matters. Look for the connections. And she came back to me a week later and said, Ruth, it's in everything. TasteEd is in everything in Development Matters. And we found that it really does support the prime areas of learning and the early learning goals in the EYFS framework. It supports the characteristics of effective learning and teaching in Development Matters as well. For example, having a go and making links between ideas. It really facilitates the development of communication and language skills amongst young children. And there are lots of links to healthy eating within PSED as well. So it just sits really beautifully with the EYFS, and our nursery practitioners certainly have really enjoyed getting to know TasteEd, embedding it in their setting, and the children are really benefiting from the sessions. So as you can see here on the screen, this is what an EYFS activity plan looks like. It's really easily, clearly laid out, so anyone can pick it up, grab and go. It has what you need to do before you start. It runs you through the activity, kind of walks you through it, highlights the curriculum links. And we've also started kind of really thinking about how we can use TasteEd within continuous provision. And, you know, we've kind of created some ideas for the use around the tough spots. There are also those prompts to remind practitioners to use the golden rules and to remind the children about the 5 senses. And also that idea around open questioning, that prompt to use open. If any of you are teaching in reception, the reception resources look a little bit different, and here's an example of a lesson plan. And for reception to year 6, there are PowerPoints as well, which can help kind of prompt the lesson and guide the practitioner through the session. In terms of equipment, I've already touched upon it. You don't need anything complicated. Essential equipment might include a colander or a sieve, chopping board and knife, food containers or bowls, and reusable plates for the children. So the kind of things that you might have around anyway. And for some of the activities, it might be useful to have spice jars or flour dredgers where we put spices in for smelling. You can have ear defenders for children to wear, and so they can really hear themselves eating. A handheld blender might be useful if you decide to go on and make smoothies or soups, but it's really not essential. A pestle and mortar can be useful, and teaspoons. In terms of children's work, and this may be less relevant if you're in an EYFS setting, but what we found with the youngest children in reception is that the children became very excited about recording their experiences of TasteEd. And so even my reception children were really keen to sit down and to record their experiences and their thoughts around the produce that we've been eating. And you can see here that their similes and their answers around what the pepper looked like to them are very creative. And so it really, really helps to support all areas of the curriculum, including literacy. So we encourage a whole setting approach to TasteEd. Share with all setting staff. You could run an introduction at a staff meeting, run a session, an experiential session to share, to train your colleagues and to train the catering staff and the support staff. Connect TasteEd with your lunchtime or your snack time. That can be a really good time to help embed some of the TasteEd approach and methods. Get your caterer involved to help children eat their vegetables and reduce food waste. So what we used to do is we used to say to the kitchen, right, this week we're going to be looking at tomatoes. Is there any chance that you could have tomatoes on the menu at lunchtime? So we would try and coordinate so children would have that kind of aligned experience. Parents are always interested in what their children are eating and how they're responding to food. So engage parents through parent and child sessions. You can run information sessions to help parents use TasteEd at home. Away from meal times, it can be a really fun activity for parents to do at home. And then share on newsletters about the types of foods you're introducing the children to, because parents love to hear about that. You can use TasteEd in different ways as well. For example, with working with children with additional needs. You can use it as a staff training icebreaker. And you can also use TasteEd to help achieve Food for Life awards. You can measure the impact of TasteEd lessons just through observing the children's change in the way they interact with food. And I certainly noticed children who had been reluctant, for example, to have a hot lunch at school, and they used to always have a packed lunch. After TasteEd, they became a bit more courageous and brave in the lunch hall and would start lining up and having a hot lunch. So at its simplest, TasteEd goes like this. Here's some food. Tell me what you can see, touch, hear, smell and taste. And if you want to, you can try some, but you don't have to. Try it if you want to. Just to give you a tiny taste of TasteEd, I have actually got a range of apples here, and I would love you just to put your answers in the chat, as we can't have a dialogue here. So I'm going to show you an apple, and I want you to tell me what you can see. Here is an apple. What do you see? What do you notice about this apple? can you see? Pop your answers in the chat. Yep, it's shiny. It is shiny. It's a very shiny apple. It's round, it's shiny, it's green. Yeah. It's shiny and very May green. Yeah. And it's a Granny Smith. Yeah, you know the name of it. That's really exciting. It's smooth. Fantastic. It looks like a ball. Yeah, it looks like it might have a wax covering. Fantastic. All right, now I'd like you to look at this apple. It does look hard and it has got dimples. It has a stalk. True, exactly. What about this apple? What do you notice about this apple? It's red, yeah. And it's red. It's dappled. That's a lovely word. Yeah, it is dappled, yeah. Its colour changes, yeah, as I turn it round. Smooth, shiny, red, looks like a cricket ball, juicy, two-tone. Yeah, fantastic. It looks warm. Oh, I like that. It's a different colour to the first one. It is. It has a green S. Fantastic. So if I hold them together, can you see how they're both apples, but they look very different? It fits in my hand. It has two colours. It's more elongated. Now, what about this apple? What do you notice about this apple? How is it different to the green apple? What do you notice about this one? The red one looks more inviting. Pale, it's smaller, it's smaller. It's smaller and less shiny. It is much less shiny, yeah, exactly. All right, well, we could go on and on and on and on. Thank you to everybody. It is a baby apple. Thank you to everybody who put your ideas in the chat. But as you can see, you can have a conversation about apples. I literally just popped to the co-op this morning to get my range of apples. And look, we could have gone on for much longer just talking about the apples. And that is the beauty of Taste Ed. And just like your engagement with me just now, if you do this activity with children, even very young children, the reaction is the same. So thank you to everybody for that. So we've been included in the DFE Help for Early Years Providers website. So you can find a link on sensory food education on the DFE website. So that's where you can find out a bit more. Active learning and progress, exactly, Monica. Next slide, please. So in terms of getting started with Taste Ed, you can sign up for the free resources. You can watch our online training video, which is coming out this summer with an EYFS focus. You can work out how to get your ingredients, talk to local shops, speak with your caterer, share shopping with other staff. It's very important to check for allergies in your class, ensure that food is prepared appropriately to prevent choking, very relevant for today's session. Try teaching a Taste Ed activity, just have a go, share your Taste Ed experience or any issues with us so we can maybe give you some support, and think about how you might embed Taste Ed into your setting. We're hoping that this will work. This is a video from the nursery in Jason School, and it just shows that amazing transformation of a little girl who was very unsure about eating a piece of plum, but through using the Taste Ed method, she actually eats a piece of plum for the very first time. Okay.
Plum. It's all slippery. It is slippery, isn't it? It feels really slippery. It's not going to hurt you, darling. Try a piece, good girl. Try a piece of plum. Pop it in your mouth. Come on. Oh, well done. What's it feel like in your mouth there, Flo? Is it tasty? Can you hear yourself chewing? Can you hear it in your head, chewing the plum?
So as you can see, it's an absolute delight to work with children delivering Taste Ed because of experiences like this one. So we've got this summer, this is the teacher training video, and we could watch just a little bit of that if we've got time, James, and we've got some practitioners talking about delivering Taste Ed in their setting. So if you could, is that okay? Yeah. Thank you.
So today we're going to do Taste Ed. What have we got on the table?
Bananas.
Bananas we have. Can you see what colour bananas? Let's keep your nose down. That's it, popping that down. What colour bananas have we got today? We've got green. Green, good girl, green. We've got yellow. And we've got brown, haven't we? Okay, which one do you think's not so right? Which one isn't brown? Yes, that's because it's green, isn't it? So that's come off the tree, hasn't it? And then when we have it in our fruit bowl, it goes a little bit riper, doesn't it? And then it goes brown, doesn't it, when it's very ripe. Can you remember when we do taste ed that no one has to like it and no one has to try it? You could just smell or lick or just hold it, don't we? Yeah, hold it. We don't have to like it, do we? Gail doesn't like bananas. Ooh. Can you hear that noise? You hear it? How does it sound? Oh, crunchy. It is crunchy, Would you like to try some, or are you going to smell it? It's slippery. It is slippery. You're right. I can smell it. Do you think that one's going to be sweeter? Lovely sharing.
When we have the different varieties of fruits and vegetables in the nursery as well, maybe you're less familiar fruits and vegetables, like we've had bok choy, we've had artichokes and things in the nursery, so it prompts children to ask more questions and it helps them develop more language. As they're naming different fruits and vegetables, they're identifying different colour groups, so it extends on their language and it extends on their knowledge. And when that information is shared with the parents at home as well, it's the link between nursery and home, so extended learning. So the parents would be a bit more maybe inclined to try those fruits and vegetables as well and explore something other than your general carrots, peas and those kind of things. So we would have a tray that's on the floor so that it's at all children's levels. So with the under twos, we would put a selection of different things in and they can get in and explore. We've had Brussels in there, which they will sit and peel, so it's working on their motor skills and their focus and their hand-eye coordination as they're taking the different layers off and just opening things out, or they will roll them down something. So that's where they kind of links into their gross motors and their physical skills as well as their colour grouping and things like that we've done with the young under twos, because a lot of the children in that room do like looking at their colours. So even with the vegetables and stuff, we can group in teaching different colours with the children and colour grouping.
We've got a lot of SEND children in our setting who really like the beige foods. And doing the activities with these children, although we probably know they're not going to taste it, is exposing them to different foods of different colours. And hopefully in the future we may get to the point where they taste it. But it's given them that opportunity where it's not put on their plate at meal times and it ends in meltdown, so to speak, or negative behaviour shown. Whereas this is giving it an opportunity in a fun way for them to play with it, explore with it. They can do what they want with it. If they want to throw it on the floor, they can throw it on the floor. It doesn't really matter, but it's giving them that freedom of opportunity.
At the beginning, she didn't want to try, did she? And then as the day's gone on, she's seen the other children, and obviously with us, at the end, she was eating everything.
So I think you can see there that the practitioners are very positive, the children are very engaged, and I think they said it better than me, really. Really, they caught that kind of taste ed philosophy just right there. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and I hope that it's inspired you to go back to your settings and find out a bit more about taste ed and to give it a go. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth and Jason. Amazing achievement to get such great engagement on an online session. I think the Apple activity worked particularly well. And bang on time as well, which does allow us time to have some discussion and chat. During your session, the chat has really lit up, so there's plenty of comment there. And I think there's a very strong theme on, well, actually, let's look at the technicals first. A reminder that you will get the slides, and a reminder you will have access to the recording for today. And in the chat, there's also a link for the online survey, which we'll email out to you later, so you can make some more considered comments comments about today's session and some requests, and to score us on how you thought we did today. So, but when we think about the trends that were coming up across the questions, there's definitely some stuff on SEND, so how the TasteEd approach is applicable, adaptable, inclusive of children with SEND. So I'm sure I think Jason probably have some view on that, because I see he's been responding to some of the comments and questions on that also. A broad church, we are in foundation years. We include PVI, childminders and school settings, and I could see that some of that content was applicable to various different parts of the sector. So it's how that approach is adaptable to every single part. So EYFS, at what age, SEND, some stuff there around preferences and allergies and entrenched behaviours, and perhaps some of the common challenges that we have as practitioners in bringing food into our practice. I guess also there's issues around sustainability and cost of activities, but also how we build these materials and activities into what are already busy and full days and lives. So lots of challenges there. Let's start off with the SEND question. So I'll bring Jason in, but the slide, just whilst we're waiting for him to go off mute, the slide does remind you to use the chat function, but if you can't do that, then to drop us an email at fy@hempsals.com, and we'll respond to as many comments and questions as possible. So SEND, Jason, what are your thoughts around the comments around that theme?
I have got, as you said, James, I've got comments in the chat with that. We have been working with a number of councils who have adopted TasteEd within their provisions, specifically Islington Council, and they're developing actually a specific project to work with SEN children. But we also have a high proportion of special schools that are using the curriculum already to really good effect, really positive way. Because what we're doing, is one of the practitioners on the video said, you're exposing children to foods they may not get exposed to at home. Okay, there isn't that whole thing about, you know, the parent and the teacher relationship is, there's very much that emotional tie with parents, obviously, with their own children. Sometimes they don't want to cause that anxiety. But if you're in a setting where you've got lots of other children as well, they're kind of that peer effect of some people are looking at that and they're touching that. And I might have a go because the little girl or little boy next door is trying that, and they might be, it's that exposure to it. And I've had children in our school, and a little boy, and he was, year 4 actually, first time he'd ever touched a lemon. Okay, and it was a massive thing for him, and it was just, he came to my office, got head teachers, and that was a big thing. We're not talking about eating stuff, we're not talking about putting something into your body, but just those little steps. And as they mentioned there, if we can expose children to that, we're not saying you don't have to like, you don't have to try, you have your preferences, everybody has their own preferences, but I think it's fantastic to give them those choices and give them that freedom to have a go at things. So yes, it works really well with those children, because they are being exposed to foodstuffs they may not be exposed to at home.
Fantastic. And I must admit, I had a coronation party at home this weekend, and there were some children at it, and they were looking very quizzically at the beautiful bowl of couscous and nuts and dried fruit that I'd made, loads of herbs in. I was very proud of it, but they were looking at it like it had landed from Mars. I channeled TasteEd. I just said, you don't have to try it, and you don't have to like it. And of course it worked. They were then, okay, there's no pressure, then I can get involved with that. So thank you for that. Megan, what trends and themes that stood out for you in the chat?
So along with that SEND one, I think there's been a really interesting one about parents and engaging parents in the work as well, and about the sort of joint behaviour change of children and parents. And I wondered if that was something that there was more to say on.
Yes, I think that's a really good spot, actually, because I know from experience working on the holiday activities and food programme with school-age children, and bringing in nutritional learning and bringing in new food experiences through that programme, another government-funded programme. Parents are really key, because children pick up the attitudes, prejudices, patterns that their parents display. So Ruth and Jason, what is your response to the issue around parents as partners? I know there was good mention of it during the presentation.
So parents are very encouraging of TasteEd. They're curious about the approach because it's a very different approach to the approach they might take with their own children at meal times. But what they notice is that the children enjoy that sense of agency. And what we hear again and again is that the children like to go home and role model the TasteEd approach in their homes. And one of my favourite stories was a little boy who went on holiday to Greece, and he was kind of being confronted with olives and hummus, and he was a bit unsure of some of this Greek food. So he said to his parents, you know, in TasteEd, no one has to try and no one has to like. So I'm going to pick up these olives and I'll feel them and I'll smell them and I might lick them. Maybe by the end of the week, I'll taste one. So the children are taking these key messages home, and the parents are fascinated by it and very excited about it. But also what they're doing is they're noticing, they're observing children at mealtimes becoming more courageous and brave around trying new food and coming into settings saying, you know, she wasn't eating cabbage at the beginning of the week and now she's eating cabbage. You know, what are you doing? What are you doing in the setting? And so and children going home and going shopping with parents and being really engaged and saying, Mummy, did you know there are names for apples? There are Granny Smiths, there are pink ladies, and they all taste different and they look different. And we've been learning about this. So even our very youngest children are very engaged, and then going home and educating their parents, who are then coming to us and saying, wow, you know, this is amazing. Jason, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I did. That's great stories there, Ruth. Really, really good. I hadn't heard the one about the child from Greece. That's a wonderful one. I think what we find with our parents also is it can be a very emotive issue. You want to do the best for your child. You want to give your child as healthy a lifestyle as you can. And sometimes that can be a challenge at home. And sometimes there's a short period of time you've got with your children, especially the younger ones. They get home, a little bit of a snack, and that. So parents are, to want of a better word, quite grateful that we're doing this type of thing in school, because we are exposing these children within a different environment to healthy food that maybe they don't want to waste their money on with the cost of living crisis at home and think, right, I want to try that, but I don't want to waste it, and they're not going to try it. We can help in that way with providing those opportunities for children here. And we get thanks for parents saying, well, I couldn't have done that at home. I haven't got the time, I haven't got the patience, I haven't got the money, I haven't got those resources to do this. And that our children are going to supermarkets, as Ruth said, and so, oh, can I try that, please? Can I try that, please? And that's through the exposure to the fruit and vegetables that they're getting in the classroom.
Great. Megan?
There's been a couple as well about some of the challenges as well that you might be able to comment on. So allergies is one of them. So how managing allergies with food waste, and then also around food waste as well is the other one that we touched on a little bit, but some of the concerns that might come up around that as well.
I mean, I'd certainly come in with a response as a EYFS practitioner. I've always felt uncomfortable when I've seen food-based activities in practice that appear to be wasteful of food, because food is a precious resource, and even more precious these days with cost of living issues. And through the Holiday Activities and Food Programme, we hear stories all of the time about the financial pressure on parents to buy food that they 100% know that children will eat. So I know this is part of a short, medium and long-term strategy, but I think contextualizing it with those ethical and economic factors, I think, is very, very timely, and I'm sure Ruth and Jason have more to add on that.
Yeah, regarding allergies, you know, when your children first come into any setting, you've got that form there to say what you believe your children's allergies are. You've got that information, and you know, we have that here, and everything that, you know, the child there, what they're eating in the school, we know from those forms what they shouldn't be exposed to and can't be exposed to. And if there is a kind of a common thing there, then don't bring that food stuff into the equation. If someone is allergic to strawberries for whatever reason, then do not expose children in that setting. That's just one fruit that you wouldn't do. You would take that risk. Regarding food waste, we have how we set it up, and is you have a small group of children, as you saw on the video there. We do it with maybe 6 or 7 children within our nursery setting and our FS2, our reception class as well. You're not buying in bulk, you're buying little bits of food there and you're cutting it up for them. So you might have, you know, a couple of lemons, you might have a, you know, a couple of oranges, you might have some apples that are cut up. There's not a great deal of waste there that you're not buying, you know, in bulk. And the whole process we do, the food that isn't then used is then put in the compost. You know, you're going through that cycle anyway of what we're doing with food. You say, you know, and then you're educating the children about, well, it isn't waste, it's not going into landfill, we can use this, and it's then helping to grow other foods that we go on. So you've got to have those conversations, because food waste is part of life. You're trying to minimize it with what you are buying and how you're exposing children to it and the small groups that you have. Yeah, that's all part and parcel of conversations that you have with children around food.
And I think a really good example for me was the apple. You know, it's wasteful if you give every child in your setting, you know, particularly older children, an apple each. Because how many of us have seen a child take one bite out of an apple and put it down, and that's your waste? So one apple chopped up into little pieces can feed a lot of people. You know, the poshest restaurants in the world have learned that trick. They'll take an apple and feed 6 people for dinner for it. So, you know, so small amounts and practical. Yeah, an apple can hold the attention and experience for a great number of children through your approach. Megan.
Yeah, there's been some questions around about age that you can start Taste Ed, which I know you've said as young as possible, and I can share my own experience on that as well. That I had my 1-year-old and my 3-year-old having a good play with mushrooms yesterday, and my 3-year-old trying a mushroom for the first time in probably a year or so, because her little sister did. And so there were still lots that can do, but there were some particular questions about non-verbal or pre-verbal children, and if you had any tips around getting the kind of the benefits of Taste Ed when children aren't yet talking or understanding things that are said.
So I think it links really well with baby-led weaning. And so it's about allowing the children to explore the food. So if they are pre-verbal, you can actually, you know, model the language that you might be expecting them to use when they're a little bit older and using words and vocabulary. So it's about giving them those sensory experiences and modeling how to feel the food, smell the food, listen to the food, and narrating that experience for them as they're doing it. I think the youngest children, I know that Kim is here, is about 2.5, I think is the age that we've used Taste Ed with children of 2.5 and up. But the children who are younger than that kind of, yeah, it's the modelling, I think, as from the adult that works really well.
And that's where good body language comes in, isn't it? And I think, you know, anybody that's had a child will know that a pre-verbal child will tell you what they think of the food that you're putting in front of them. They don't need words. They will, it'll be written all over their face, or indeed the food will move through the sky and over the room rather than being eaten. I think there was one question that's definitely a DFE focused, Laura, and whenever the department talks about new policy or changes to things, the inevitable question is, when will that happen? And often more often than not, the department cannot confirm the timings. But the question is, you know, you mentioned an iteration of the EYFS to include this new policy. So the question was when this policy change will appear in EYFS.
The plan is for September, but that is subject to parliamentary process.
Okay, well, that's a fantastic answer. We've got a month, and we've got the caveats, so it depends on what.
I just want to clarify there. So even I've said the next iteration of the EYFS, but if this change were to come in September, it would be the 2-year-old ratio change and the supervision whilst eating change. There won't be any other changes if this was to come into September. So I don't want to panic anybody thinking that we're going to have a whole new reformed EYFS in September, because that's not what's going to happen.
Yes, that's a very good clarification for that tweak. But who needs to wait for that to happen before we adopt all these fantastic ideas that DFE and Tasted have shared with us today? I'm afraid that is it for today's session. The next slide tells you what you can do next, and I will add to that slide as well. As Megan said, subscribe to Foundation Years newsletter if you've not already done it. Do pass that information on. It's remarkable how many practitioners I meet who don't know about Foundation Years and aren't benefiting from the information that we're able to share. Do follow us on Twitter or Facebook, whatever your preference is, and look out for more online and face-to-face events and newsletter lives. And the best way to find out about that is to follow our social media and to sign up for the newsletter. Because we all want to engage, connect and share best practice. And a great way to do that is to sign up for the Tasted onto the Tasted website and to access those free, can I just repeat that, those free resources that you can use and adapt. And then the final thing I'm going to ask you to do is to look for the evaluation link for today's session. It's been in the chat a few times today, and we will send it out by email to you along with the slides and the link to the recording. But our mission today was to engage, connect and share best practice. Our focus today was on food sensory education. I think we've done that very well. Thank you very much to all of our speakers and input. It's been a fantastic morning, and I can see from the chat that people have not only appreciated today's session, but are dead keen to put it into practice. So thanks very much for joining us and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.